First comment gets a shout out next video.
He has a baby by a woman that was dating Tupac.
Wow.
To add to it, but we had to cut it down so he couldn't.
For time. Just start a private investigation firm. I'll be your first client. This 50 find out everything.
Something that y'all don't know. Breaking news, something that I've never told anybody. This is a secret, something that, will probably be in my book.
What's going on, Wilson Fairfax? Yeah, we need a Wilson Fairfax. What? Fairfax! We're man shot in our car right now. We're in the car right now. We're rolling to the house.
Now, it was this documentary that claimed, which we know wasn't true.
Yeah, check this out. We don't talk about things that are nonsense. We don't even entertain nonsense, my brother.
Love that shit. I play that shit in my fucking sleep. I wake up to it and I brush my teeth to it.
I like this shit too. Come on, man. Be honest. Did you like it?
Hell fucking no. Don't ever ask me that fucking question again.
There's something fucking wrong with you. Or you know that shit was hard.
Yeah, no, I mean, we wouldn't even get into nonsense like that. You know what I'm saying? It's nonsense.
Which we never believed, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
There is a moment in every documentary where the silence feels louder than the footage. A pause that suggests something is missing. Not cut for time. Not trimmed for pacing. But removed because it went too far. According to online chatter surrounding Sean Combs, The Reckoning, those moments exist, and viewers were never meant to see them. Not on Netflix. Not anywhere. The series arrived framed as a controlled deep dive. Polished. Legal. Careful. It promised accountability without chaos. But almost immediately, questions followed. Why did certain scenes feel rushed? Why did major accusations stop just short of names, dates, or consequences? And why were people close to the production quietly hinting that what aired was only a fraction of what was filmed? Behind the scenes, reports began circulating about an enormous archive of unused material. Hours upon hours of footage that never made the final cut. Not because it lacked value, but because it was considered too dangerous. Too complicated. Too risky. According to insiders and public commentary, the documentary team captured reactions, statements, and connections that reached far beyond what audiences saw on screen. The final version, some claim, was a compromise. At the center of it all is Sean Combs, a man whose influence spans decades of music, business, and celebrity culture. But this story is not just about him. It's about power. About how influence reshapes narratives before they ever reach the public. And about how platforms built on exposure still operate under invisible limits. What makes this case unsettling is not a single accusation, but the pattern. Scenes reportedly filmed, then quietly removed. References softened. Timelines blurred. And a growing sense that the documentary wasn't asking the most uncomfortable questions, it was avoiding them. Viewers noticed. Online discussions exploded.
50 Cent does have 140 additional hours of unreleased Diddy footage that he did not use inside of the documentary. And people are saying that this footage will not only just add more time to Diddy's sentence, but Diddy might not ever get out. And in this unreleased footage, there's a guy named Neil who allegedly works right under Diddy. They say he is on tape, literally tampering with witnesses, giving out addresses, bribing people by offering money, telling them that they'll pay for their lawyers. The type of shit that would definitely be considered witness tampering, obstruction of justice, just to name a few. And with this footage being in the hands of 50 Cent, I think it's only a matter of time before this footage sees daylight.
And suddenly, deleted scenes became more talked about than the episodes themselves. Names started surfacing in speculation. Not as proven facts, but as unanswered questions. Why were certain relationships never explored? Why did some testimonies end abruptly? And why does the idea of a second part feel less like a sequel and more like a threat? Netflix, a platform known for pushing boundaries, appeared unusually restrained. That restraint only fueled suspicion. Because when a story this heavy is edited down, every cut feels intentional. Every omission feels loaded. And that brings us to the question no one behind the scenes seems willing to answer directly: what was actually removed, and who benefited from keeping it hidden? If you're already feeling that tension, stay with me. Because what comes next isn't about rumors. It's about patterns, red flags, and the uncomfortable trail left behind when a story is edited by fear instead of truth. If you're watching this closely, hit like, share this with someone who loves real investigations, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Drop a comment, first one gets pinned. To understand why certain scenes may have been erased, you have to understand the world this documentary stepped into. This isn't just a story about one powerful figure. It's about an entire ecosystem built on access, loyalty, and silence. For decades, Sean Combs wasn't just an artist or a producer. He was a gatekeeper. Opportunities flowed through him. Careers rose or stalled based on proximity. And in environments like that, truth rarely moves freely. From the earliest days of his rise, Combs surrounded himself with influence: music, fashion, nightlife, media. Success came fast, and with it came control. People close to him have long described a culture where perception mattered more than reality. Where problems were handled quietly. Where conflict stayed behind closed doors. None of this is illegal on its own. But it creates fertile ground for something darker to grow unchecked. When The Reckoning went into production, it didn't just document allegations. It documented reactions. Body language. Pauses. What people were willing to say on camera, and what they refused to finish. According to public discussion around the series, some of the most revealing moments weren't explosive statements, but subtle shifts. A witness changing tone. An interview abruptly ending. A subject asking what would happen if they kept talking. These moments matter. Because red flags don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper. Viewers noticed patterns. Certain episodes hinted at deeper connections, then pulled back. Entire timelines seemed compressed, as if too many details existed to fit safely into a single narrative. And behind that editing was a legal reality. Every claim had consequences. Every implication had risk. For a platform like Netflix, the question wasn't just what was true, but what was survivable. What makes this chapter unsettling is how many people appear at the edges of the story. Not as accused criminals, but as powerful names orbiting the same spaces. Music executives. Celebrities. Industry icons. Their presence isn't proof of wrongdoing. But the documentary's reluctance to explore those intersections fully has become its loudest silence. In true crime, red flags often reveal themselves in hindsight. Patterns of behavior dismissed as just how things are. Power protecting itself. And people who sense danger long before the public does, but don't yet have a place to stand safely with the truth. The deleted scenes, if they exist as claimed, likely didn't introduce new crimes. They likely showed something more uncomfortable: how close the system came to acknowledging what it didn't want to confront. And once you see that pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee. Because the biggest warning sign in any investigation isn't accusation, it's avoidance.
Listen up, you clown Marlon. Those 4 hours of The Reckoning on Netflix, that's just the trailer I cut from my 140 hours of footage. This 140-hour tape doesn't just have him on it. It's got the parties, the deals, all those friends pretending they don't know him now. I've only shown a sliver, and they're already scrambling, turning on each other. Why does his lawyers quit? Because they know the evidence I have on their client is a losing hand. So save your breath, Marlon. The more you and your crew come at me in a panic, the more it shows you're guilty. These 140 hours are my proof. No phone call from prison is gonna save Diddy. He didn't just cross me, he pissed off people who won't stay silent anymore.
In the next part, we move from patterns to moments. From background to the point where restraint begins to crack. If this story has you thinking, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who questions what we're shown, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below, first one gets pinned. There comes a point in every story like this where the tension stops simmering and starts to break the surface. For The Reckoning, that moment wasn't a single scene, it was the growing realization that what viewers were watching might not be the full story. According to public claims and online analysis, the documentary team captured far more than what ultimately aired. And that gap between what was filmed and what was shown is where this chapter turns dark. The most talked about claim centers on the sheer volume of unused footage. Reports circulated that hundreds of hours were recorded during production. Interviews that ran long. Conversations that went off script. Reactions that couldn't be neatly edited into a controlled narrative. While there is no public release of this material, the idea alone raised serious questions. If so much was left out, what kind of content forces a platform as powerful as Netflix to hesitate? Some of the removed material, according to speculation framed by commentators, allegedly involved deeper timelines and clearer connections. Not just isolated allegations, but recurring themes: control, fear of retaliation, and the emotional toll on those who spoke up. Viewers pointed out moments where episodes abruptly cut away just as conversations seemed to reach a critical point. Not with resolution, but with silence. This is where the crime-adjacent nature of the story becomes clearer. Not a single dramatic act caught on camera, but a long trail of alleged behavior, power imbalance, and institutional shielding. In many true crime cases, the most damaging evidence isn't a weapon or a recording. It's consistency. Multiple voices describing the same atmosphere without coordination. The same unspoken rules. The same fear. What The Reckoning shows, and perhaps more importantly, what it avoids, is how difficult it is to investigate power without becoming entangled in it. Legal teams. Contracts. Non-disclosure agreements. Careers on the line. Every interview exists under pressure, and every edit becomes a decision about liability. Netflix's role here is critical. By releasing the series, the platform acknowledged the seriousness of the subject. But by limiting its scope, it may have drawn a line around how far the story could go. That line is where audiences now focus their attention. Because when a documentary feels unfinished, viewers instinctively ask why. And that question leads directly into the next phase of the story. Because when material is withheld, it doesn't disappear. It leaks into public discussion. It shapes suspicion. And it invites independent investigation. In the next chapter, we look at what happened after the episodes aired, how reactions from insiders, celebrities, and the public shifted the narrative in ways the documentary never could. If you're still following closely, hit like, share this with someone who reads between the lines, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Drop your thoughts in the comments. When The Reckoning finished streaming, the story didn't slow down. It fractured. What had been a controlled narrative suddenly spilled into public space, where reactions moved faster than legal teams ever could. This is the phase documentaries can't contain, the aftermath. And in this case, the response may have been more revealing than anything Netflix aired. Almost immediately, commentary videos, threads, and reaction breakdowns flooded the internet. Viewers weren't just discussing what they saw. They were dissecting what felt missing. Pauses that lingered too long. Faces that tightened when certain topics came up. Scenes that ended just before the air turned uncomfortable. The consensus forming online wasn't that the documentary lied, but that it stopped short. Public figures added fuel, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Vague statements. Carefully worded posts. Comments that hinted at knowledge without making claims. None of this constitutes evidence, and it's important to say that clearly. But in true crime, public reaction often becomes a secondary investigative layer. Patterns of denial, deflection, or strategic silence can speak volumes. What followed was a kind of informal investigation by the audience. Old interviews resurfaced. Archived footage was rewatched with new context. Timelines were compared. Not to prove guilt, but to understand influence. Who was present? Who stayed quiet? Who suddenly distanced themselves once questions became louder? This is where Netflix's restraint became a focal point. Instead of being praised for caution, it was criticized for control. Some viewers argued the platform protected itself more than the truth. Others defended the decision, pointing out the legal risks of amplifying unproven allegations. Both perspectives can exist at once. And that tension, between responsibility and revelation, is exactly what defines this chapter. Behind the scenes, no official statement clarified whether a second part was planned or if deleted scenes would ever be released. That uncertainty only deepened suspicion. Because in true crime history, when material is genuinely harmless, it's usually dismissed openly. When it's sensitive, it's buried quietly. Families of alleged victims, advocacy voices, and industry outsiders began reframing the conversation. This wasn't just about one man or one series. It was about how institutions handle uncomfortable stories involving wealth and power. About how truth becomes negotiable when consequences grow large. By this point, the documentary had evolved into something else entirely. Not a finished product, but a trigger. A starting point for a much larger reckoning that no single platform could fully contain. And as the noise grew louder, one final question remained unanswered: what happens when public pressure meets legal reality? That's where this story reaches its most sobering point. If you want to see how it all lands, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who follows media accountability, and subscribe so you don't miss the final chapter. Drop a comment below. By the time the dust settled, one thing was clear: the reckoning was never really about what Netflix showed. It was about what the system allows to be shown, and where the line is drawn when truth collides with power. No arrests followed the series. No courtroom scenes. No definitive legal resolution tied directly to the documentary itself. And that, in many ways, is the most unsettling conclusion of all. Because this story ends not with justice delivered, but with accountability deferred. Legally, Sean Combs remains protected by the same principles that apply to anyone else: allegations are not convictions. Speculation is not proof. And documentaries, no matter how serious their tone, do not determine guilt. Netflix operated within that reality. Every edit, every omission, every careful phrase likely passed through legal review. From that perspective, restraint wasn't avoidance, it was survival. But ethically, the outcome feels heavier. When so many voices point toward discomfort, fear, and imbalance, the absence of resolution leaves a void. Not just for viewers, but for those who believe their experiences were only partially acknowledged. In true crime, closure often comes from the process itself: investigations, trials, sentences. Here, the process stalled before it could fully begin. The families, the communities, and the broader culture are left with fragments. A documentary that hints instead of confirms. Deleted scenes that may never surface. And a public conversation forced to exist in the gray space between what can be said and what might be true. This is not a story of a single crime neatly wrapped up. It's a reflection of how modern power operates. How influence can slow narratives. How platforms weigh exposure against risk. And how truth, in some cases, becomes something negotiated rather than revealed. For viewers, the reckoning becomes personal. What do we expect from documentaries? Entertainment? Education? Justice? And when a story feels unfinished, is that a failure of the filmmakers, or a mirror held up to a system that resists being fully examined? Netflix may never release the deleted scenes. There may never be a part 2. And the footage people believe exists may remain locked away indefinitely. But the impact is already here. Once questions are raised at this scale, they don't disappear. They linger. They shape perception. And they ensure that silence is no longer neutral. This case doesn't end with certainty. It ends with discomfort. With unresolved tension. And with a reminder that some stories aren't buried, they're suspended. So here's the question I want to leave you with: when powerful stories are edited for safety, who gets protected, and who gets left behind? If this video made you think, make sure to like it, share it with someone who questions the narratives we're given, subscribe to Crime Decoder, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read every single one.